ask God, what have you put into me that I can give back to the world? What dream can I pursue that's going to benefit others? Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We're so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, and today we're talking all about the importance of dreaming and creating a vision.
Hi, I'm Holly. I'm Esther's co-host. And if you're listening when this episode comes out, it is Christmas. So Merry Christmas. And I know that you got up at 2 a.m. this morning when the episode published because you were waiting for Santa and you wanted to listen to our podcast. So
right.
welcome.
Yeah. No, we know you're probably not listening to this on Christmas. You're probably listening to it later in the week.
Right.
But we did want to wish you a Merry Christmas because we love Christmas and we're excited to be able to share this episode with you even during the holiday week. So this is our second episode in our goal setting series. And in episode 24, we talked about the one thing that you should do before the new year, and that was reflect on the previous year. And so we talked about kind of our overall framework that we're approaching goal setting with, which is starting with reflection, and then it goes to visions and dreaming. And then we get into goals and finally implementation and creating habits and routines. So we will be covering those other topics in January, but today we'll be talking all about the vision and dream part of this process. So if you haven't listened to episode 24, though, we do want to encourage you to go back and listen. And we know that this is coming out, if you're listening live, you're hearing this at the end of December or the beginning of January. However, if you're listening at a different time of the year, I think you can still take a lot of what we share and implement it in your own life. Because really, you can do this process at any time of the year. It doesn't have to be specifically at the end of a year or at the beginning of a new year. We were talking about the fact that, New Year's, some people have kind of this idea of it being a magical time where something amazing happens, but really it's just a new day, right, Holly?
Yeah, we were talking about it and I told Esther how much I really just don't like New Year's. It's not my favorite holiday. And I was just like, it's no big deal. Every single night I go to bed, the next day still comes and it's not that exciting. I don't know that New Year's is any different. So
Right. So if you love New Year and you love like this idea of a fresh start, hey, embrace that, but also know that you can do this, in the middle of the year. You can do this in March or in September. It doesn't matter. So I did want to mention one thing too, because after we recorded the episode on reflecting, I actually was listening to a different podcast, and it's The Next Right Thing by Emily Freeman. And she had an episode all about reflection. So it was really funny that I actually just listened to that right after we had recorded episode 24. And her episode talks about how she implements reflection in her life. And she really talks about how it's not just a once a year thing. She gave examples of how she does it on a regular basis. And I would encourage you to go check that out and listen to it. And we'll put the link in the show notes so you can click right over and check it out. It's episode 61 of The Next Right Thing. So go check that out if you want to kind of dive deeper into the reflection process.
So before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know about our sponsor for this episode. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. So just go to estherlittlefield.com/audible and just browse the selection of audio programs. Download your free title and start listening. It's just that easy. So if you want to go over to estherlittlefield.com/audible, perhaps you can pick up one of the books that we mentioned in today's episode and start listening to it.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about on this podcast, we talk about the fact that leaders are learners. And a lot of times we're referencing books and our guests are referencing books that they recommend. So I love that with Audible, you can incorporate reading and growth, personal growth and spiritual growth on a regular basis just by, going and listening to audiobooks when you are doing other things. That's my
Mm,
favorite way to to incorporate reading into my life.
yeah.
So, as we mentioned, today's episode is all about dreaming and creating a vision for the future. And we feel like it's really the second step in the goal setting process. And this is a great time. We did talk about the fact that it's the end of 2018 and we're looking into 2019. So we want to think about how we can create a dream and a vision for our future, both personally and maybe with your family or your team or your business. So, we're going to start off by talking about dreaming, and then we're going to go into creating a vision, which will kind of help us put a little bit more feet to our dreams. I don't know if that phrase makes sense, but
I think it does.
it's the best one I could come up with. So, then in upcoming episodes, like I mentioned, we will go further into the process about how we can actually bring that vision to life because we can't just stop at creating a vision and a dream, right? We need
Mhm.
to actually figure out how is that going to happen. So Holly's going to start us off with talking about dreaming.
Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about why we need to dream. I think that it is an important thing to practice regularly. I don't know about you, but I tend to get bogged down by the things that happen in my daily life, all the things I don't get done, all the things I still didn't accomplish. And I have a lot of negative self talk around what I should be and what I'm still not. And so it's interesting when I think about dreaming that the way that I tend to be is not the mindset of what a dreamer is. A dreamer can see past all of those things. Dreaming sort of lifts your mind and your heart out of the clouds of daily living and the things that really weigh you down and pulls you higher into what could be. It gives you the freedom to be something else, to be free of the chains of sin that still bind you, that still weigh you down through the day. And I love this because this is exactly what the gospel is all about. It's freeing you from your sins and it's giving you the freedom to live out a God-given dream. In Galatians 5:1, it says, "It's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened by the yoke of slavery." I don't know about you, but that just makes me feel amazing when I think about that because I don't have to be um, constrained by the things that I'm still not free of. God has set me free from those things, and I have the freedom to dream. I mean, if you think about someone who's sort of, in a really bad situation in their lives, homelessness or addiction or those sorts of things, they can't dream. They don't have the ability to see what their life could be. And that's exactly what the gospel is. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And so I think it's really important to just talk about how we can dream these things, how we can sort of break off those binding things and sort of see where our life could be going, where God has a direction for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we talked about this last time as well, but again, we see that personality can play a role in
Oh, yeah.
this dreaming versus getting stuck in the day-to-day grind.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are more naturally bent towards the dreaming side of things, and
Yeah.
some are more bent to the practical day to day. And I think we've talked about this that even
Yeah.
within ourselves, like I tend to be more like day to day, how is this going to happen? The practical,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at like implementing a vision. And you tend to be better at coming up
Yeah.
with those dreams and thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the future. So just be aware of that for yourself. But I'm going to share a couple thoughts about how I allow myself to dream because I do have to work at it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, one thing is just to brainstorm. And that sounds very basic, but really, when you brainstorm, you're thinking of all the possibilities of what life could be, what the future could be, what God could do, what God could do in your business, in your church, in your family, you know, really just allowing yourself to dream big. I mean, it's such a
Yeah.
cliche phrase, but really, again, not judging when you're sitting down and you're brainstorming, you're jotting down these ideas. Like, don't judge, oh, that could never happen. Because
Right.
that tends to be what I will do is I will think, well, oh, that would be great, but that's probably not going to happen, you know? But when you brainstorm, you should allow yourself just to free flow and allow all the different ideas to come. That doesn't mean that those are going to be the things that you end up uh, pursuing, but it's okay to allow yourself to think about those different possibilities.
Mm.
Then consider what God has put into your heart. And this is even more important. You know, praying for something that God would give you. Pray that God will direct you into the dreams that he wants you to pursue. Uh, Ask God, what have you put into me that I can give back to the world? What can I, what dream can I pursue that's going to benefit others and that's going to help, lead people to Christ? And then is there something that you keep coming back to over and over? This is a question I ask myself, and it helps me to realize what some of my dreams can and should be.
Mm.
And there's certain themes in my life that just keep coming up, and little inklings of um, directions that I sense God giving me. And sometimes I want to ignore them because they are scary.
Mhm.
But when I realize, okay, this keeps coming up, it's probably something that God is trying to put on my heart to pursue, right? So ask yourself and reflect on if there's things that are coming up in your life over and over that you sense God may be leading you towards. So,
Mm.
Holly, do you have other thoughts on how we can dream and allow this to happen in our lives?
Yeah, so I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but don't limit yourself. Don't let the daily things that you are dealing with be a part of your dreaming process. Don't let your circumstances even come into play, really. That's the whole point of dreaming, is to get yourself out of your current circumstance and think about what could be. So make sure you kind of free your mind of those things to the best of your ability while you're doing this. And that way you can go ahead and really push into what could be for the future. The other thing is, does God keep showing you a dream and do you keep brushing it aside? I know for me, when I started thinking about women's ministry and speaking, I went to probably 2 or 3 years of our women's retreat thinking, I would love to be able to do this someday. I would love to be able to speak. I would love to be able to speak to women. And I just kept brushing it aside. And it was for a lot of like really good reasons that I brushed it aside. I mean, the person who was doing it had a call from God. She was where she was supposed to be. It wasn't my time. And so, you know, if you keep kind of coming back to those things, but you keep brushing them aside for what you think are good reasons, you're gonna forget that dream. You're gonna squash it. So
Yeah.
I would encourage you to just keep thinking, or maybe clue yourself into when a dream comes into your head and you brush it aside. That is a big clue.
Yeah. That's
So
kind of what I was referring to earlier too. Definitely
yeah,
be
yeah,
aware of that for yourself. And I'll add one more thing. Think about what this is just a little thing that I have learned for myself. Think about what brings tears to your eyes. Like,
yeah.
if you are listening to something or you hear somebody speak and something catches your breath and gives you um
Mm,
that frog in your throat, that sense of you feel like you're about to cry.
yeah.
I don't know about you, but that for me is a signal that something is stirring in my heart. There
Mm,
might be God might be trying to speak to me. I'm not saying that when God speaks to you, it's always emotional, but I think that there are times that our emotions can be an indication of there's something going on here. Our spirit is being stirred,
mm,
and be sensitive to that when you
yeah.
when you experience that.
I love that. And I think the last thing that I would say is to study dreamers in the Bible. There are a lot of dreamers in the Bible, and there are a lot of times when God uses dreams to be a part of someone's journey, someone's calling, someone's purpose. And so I would encourage you to study them and see how God has worked through those stories in the Bible. And I don't know about you, but whenever I think about them and whenever I am studying them, it just reminds me of God's faithfulness and how He has a plan all along for us. It sort of gets me thinking about Joseph. He had a dream as a child that his brothers would one day bow down to him. And it definitely didn't look like that would happen when he was in the pit, when he was sold into slavery, when he was accused of assault, when he was in jail. None of those things in a human mindset would make you think that someday he was going to be elevated to a position where his brothers would bow down to him. But it did happen. God used all of those things to fulfill the dream that he had set in Joseph's heart years before. God used those things to bring Joseph to a place where he could save a nation. And I think a lot of it, when I think about this, I think, God gave him this dream, but through all of those situations in Joseph's life, God was forming him, his heart, his spirit, his mind into what Joseph needed to be so that when he stepped into that dream, he could fully live it out. And he had all the tools and the skills, the mindset, the heart set, all of those things where he would be able to obey God and eventually save a nation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just love that story. I love what it says, and honestly, I love how Joseph. No, it doesn't necessarily say this in the text, but in my mind, I feel like he sort of treasured that dream in his heart. I mean, Mary. It says the same thing about Mary. She
Mm.
treasured the dream that God gave her in her heart, and it just is that sort of keeping that little precious piece that God gave to you close to yourself. I don't know. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
Yeah. And I think that I guess the thing that I always am conscious of is that not all of us are going to have a clear-cut vision or dream like Joseph
Right.
had
Yes, you're
or Mary.
absolutely right.
Like
Yeah.
most of us aren't going to have an angel appear to us and tell us
Yeah.
the future. However,
That's really too bad. That would be a lot
I know it'd
easier.
be kind of cool. Although it might be kind of scary too. But still, like I think about when I was a child and I would walk around my neighborhood and in my mind, and I talked about this on a previous episode, I would be preaching sermons in my head. Like
Mhm.
I would be coming up with all these things that I felt like I needed to teach people, which I don't even know what I was coming up with, but that was like a little dream, a little inkling of a dream
Mm,
that I think sort of now looking back, I realize, okay, God was putting something in my heart that I was going to have a desire to share with other women something on my heart and something that
yeah.
he's been teaching me, and that's I've been able to do that here through the podcast and other ways. So yeah, hold on to those things that maybe you never gave it a second thought, but if you can
Mhm.
think back to your childhood even and think, are there times where maybe God was showing you something that could be a dream for the future?
Yeah. So there is a book that I have read that I really enjoy that talks about dreaming. It's called Chase the Lion by Mark Batterson. And I would definitely encourage you to read this book, especially, I guess, if you find dreaming a little bit difficult. If you find it an exercise that you really have to push yourself to do, I would encourage you to read this book. So it's basically just about, are your dreams big enough? If they don't scare you, then they're not big enough. It's about setting God sized goals and pursuing your God given passions. So basically, if you can do it alone without God's help, it's too small. And I don't know about you, but I kind of want to live a life where I can clearly see that God is propelling me, helping me, pushing me, gifting me with these opportunities that I could have never gotten on my own. That's the life that I want to live. And so it also talks about facing your fears and fighting for your dreams. And I have found that as I've sort of pushed into the dreams that God has given me, it has been so scary. And I've had to, when you talk about fighting for your dreams, I've had to fight with myself for my dreams more than anyone else. I find that for the most part, at least for me and in my experience, I had lots of people who were cheering me on, who were encouraging me and mentoring me. I had to fight myself to actually go after those dreams because I was the biggest sort of obstacle
Yeah.
in actually getting there. And so I would encourage you that if you have a dream that God is putting on your heart, to face those fears. He's with you the whole entire time. And he's not going to let you down. So a quote that I love from the book is, "Don't let what's wrong with you keep you from worshiping what's right with God." And I think that sort of encapsulates all of this. Don't don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to stumble. Keeping your eyes on what's right with God, and how He loves you and how He has wired you and what dreams He's given you is really more important than what's actually wrong with you, because He is going to be working through all of those things to sort of refine and flesh out the things that need to sort of be coming out of you. So those are just some thoughts from the book. I would definitely encourage you to pick it up. Like I said, especially if you find it difficult for yourself to really break out of your daily mindset or break out of the sins that really bind you or your circumstances, it's a really great book for that
Mhm.
purpose. So
I'm gonna have to put that in my Audible cart
yes, you will.
for one of my books that I'll read in 2019.
Actually,
So
it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I've read this book, but I feel like if I heard it, it might hit me differently.
yeah,
So, yeah, I might have to do the same.
I'm not sure if it's available on Audible, but I will check. I'm guessing it is. I'm thinking that probably it is. So
I hope so.
yeah,
We're saying that, and it may
right.
not
We're
be,
we're not
but
we're not making any promises, but check it out. It's Mark Batterson, and he has a bunch of books, so I'm
yes,
thinking that probably it is. So
probably. Yeah.
awesome. So I think that, the dreaming part is kind of what we need to allow ourselves to do before we get into creating a vision, because the dreaming is kind of the free flowing, like we talked about, letting the ideas come, letting God speak to you, thinking about ways that God has put things in your heart in the past.
Mm,
But then we get into this idea of creating a vision. So, what do we mean by this word vision? Basically, what we mean is an idea or concept about where you want to go in the future. So it's a little bit more specific than a dream, right?
mm,
Like a
right.
dream might be, I want to write a book, but a vision might be, I'm going to write a book by the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Right? By the end of 2019, I will have written a book. So that's a little bit more specific than a dream. So it's different also from a mission. So if you think about, often we hear, when we, especially if you think about organizations or businesses, they often will have a mission, vision, and values. And so a mission is going to be why you exist and what you do and how you do it. So a mission is typically very present day oriented. It's like your purpose for existing. But a vision is looking to the future. So when we think about vision, why do we need a vision, and why is it important for us as leaders to have a vision for the future? A couple of reasons that I can think of are that vision brings clarity. You know, I wear glasses, and if I don't have my glasses on, everything is very fuzzy. I can't really see. I can't see more than a couple feet in front of me. But when I have my glasses on, I have that clarity to see much further down the road, much further away from me.
Mm,
So vision also shows people where you're going. And so you're able to say, okay, this is where we're headed. And it helps you to stay focused on the end result. So again, if you're someone like me that tends to get stuck in the weeds of day to day, how are we implementing, how are we getting things done, it's really helpful to have a vision, because I can refer back to that vision and say, okay, wait a minute. This is the end goal, right? This is kind of where we're headed. This is where we want to be 6 months from now, a year from now. And it helps me just get focused again and get out of my head of all the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
So, Holly, what do you think? Are there areas where we might want to create a vision for 2019?
Yeah, so I definitely think that as we're thinking about this, you don't have to just create one big vision. You can actually create visions that are specific to certain areas of your life. So, your personal life, personal development, growth, your spiritual walk, um, family, maybe how you want things to look for your family in the future, where you want to be, what you want to be doing as a family, what that looks like. And then maybe your team, ministry, organization, and your business. So it's important, I think, to maybe have a different vision laid out for each one of those areas of your life.
Yeah. And so this might be different for each person listening, because
Right.
you want to look at your own life and say, okay, what are the primary roles that I play? Like maybe
Mhm.
I'm a wife and a mom, and maybe I'm a business owner. So I want to have a vision for those two areas. Or maybe you're a single woman with a career in your
Mhm.
workplace, and you also are your women's ministry leader at your church.
Yep.
So you want to look at the major areas of your life and say, okay, this is what I need to create a vision for this spot and this spot. And so once you know what those areas are that you want to create a vision for, we want to talk a little bit about ways that you can actually do this. So how can you cast a vision for the future? So I'll start off just by sharing kind of ways that you could do this personally and or with your family. So we're looking at this questions that you could ask yourself, or you could sit down with your husband or with your children, depending on their age, and maybe go through some of these questions to think about a vision for the future. So, first question is, where do you see yourself a year from now? So, just big picture, where would you like to be a year from now? You could also say, what does our ideal family situation look like a year from now? You know, if anything could change in our family, what would it be? What would my ideal schedule look like? This is a big one for me. I like to think about what would my ideal schedule be if I could just, and again, some of this is dreaming, some of this is saying not thinking about the current constraints that you have in your life, but ideally, what would my schedule be on a week to week basis? What accomplishments or goals have I achieved a year from now? And how does my family unit feel? What are some ways that we've connected throughout the year? So those are just a few ideas of questions to ask. There's definitely probably a lot more that you could think about for creating this vision, but we're going to talk about the different questions to ask and the ways to create these visions for yourself, your family, and then your team or business. And then we'll kind of talk about what to do after you go through those questions. So for your team, business, or organization, I'm kind of lumping those all together because I feel like essentially they're all things that you might be doing with a bigger group of people.
Mm.
So this could be a ministry team, a volunteer team. It could be a business in which you have employees or team members, or it could be a bigger organization like maybe your church as a whole. Okay, but I think that creating a vision for this is so important. When you're leading others, they want to know where you're taking them. If they
Mm.
do not feel confident in the vision, it's going to be tough for them to stick around, right?
Yeah. I love this idea. I think, especially when I think about volunteering, when I volunteered in like a church or a ministry, if I didn't know the vision, I felt like I was just doing the work to do the work. And once I caught the vision and I understood it, I really felt even so much more, um, I guess, engaged with that ministry. And I felt really a ton more invested. So
Yeah.
this is really a great idea. And it's really important to convey your vision
Yeah.
often. So,
Right. So this
yeah.
is a little different than just your personal vision or even your family vision, because it's such a small unit that you don't really need to get buy-in that much. But for a team or an organization, you have to get buy-in from the rest of the team members or the church members or whatever it might be. So one of the key principles that we need to remember when setting a vision for a larger organization is that people are following you first as the leader, and the vision is actually secondary. And John Maxwell talks about this in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. He says people buy into the leader first, then the leader's vision. So this is really the idea that people have to buy into both the leader and the vision.
Mm.
And I think this just points to the fact that self-awareness is so important as a leader, because if you are not self-aware, it's going to be really difficult to know whether people are buying into you or not. You might be
Yeah.
going gung-ho into this vision that you really believe in, and it might be an amazing vision. But if your team is not buying into you and they're not excited about following you as a person,
Mm.
then the vision is going to fail,
Yeah.
because you're not aware that your team really needs something different from you. So I just want to refer back to episode 8, where Holly and I talked about self-awareness being really a major key in leadership. And I recently heard a study reference, and I'm going to have to try and find it. And if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But it was a study that pointed out basically that the most successful leaders are the ones who are most self-aware.
Mm.
And it totally makes sense to me because, again, being in leadership is it's all about leading people, all about how you're able to influence people. And if you are not aware and don't have people there to support you and to show you your blind spots, and if you're not willing to take feedback and things like that, it's going to be really tough to lead an organization with a big vision. So that's a principle to remember first, is that people are following you first, and then the vision is secondary. And then I also wanted to mention another great point about a vision is that it needs to have hope. It needs to be filled with hope.
Mm.
And this is from the 4 Dimensions of Extraordinary Leadership from Jenny Catron. She just talks about the idea of one of the dimensions of leadership is this idea of having ability to have vision. And she talks about it as the dimension of strength. And that's
Mm.
where the vision comes from. But, having a strong vision needs to show people that there's a potential and a possibility. They need to be excited about what could come from this vision. So, a couple thoughts about this is that you need to get input from your team, especially high capacity leaders,
Mm.
when you're creating the vision. And then once the vision is created, you need to be sharing it often. It needs to be a regular part of your conversations with your team, with your leaders. So, we're going to talk briefly about ways to create a vision as a team. So, again, these are some questions that you can ask. You can do this individually as the leader. So, say you have a business. If you have a business and you're the CEO or you're the founder, you're probably going to want to create the vision by yourself first, or just with your core leadership team, and then maybe incorporate some other team members into that discussion.
Mm.
But you can go through some of these questions and think about the future. So, what is different about my team, business, or organization a year from now? How have we grown? A year from now, what achievements have we made? What accomplishments have we completed? Maybe you think about, where are we making the most impact in the world? What are the areas that we are providing the most help to other people? In what ways have we helped others? Holly, do you have any other questions that you might ask as a team leader in this circumstance?
Yeah, definitely. So, when you're thinking about what your team looks like a year from now, you can also ask, um, are we serving the same people, or have we made changes? Has that demographic changed? How is our team different a year from now? Do we have more staff, less staff? Have we streamlined roles? How does that team look different? And in a year from now, have we expanded? Have we changed locations? What's different about the physicality of where we actually are, the spaces that we take up, the spaces that are used for either the business or the ministry or whatnot? What do they look like? Have they changed at all?
Yeah.
So I think that some of those things are really great to be thinking about. And of course, there's lots of different questions that you can create that are specific to your team or your ministry,
Right.
that would be really tailored to them. But I think these are really great starter questions, to get you sort of on that track of what you look like a
Yeah.
year from now.
Yes. And one of the rules that I will say about this process is that, again, just like with the dreaming and the brainstorming, do not allow yourself or your team to get into, well, how's that going to happen? In this
Yeah.
conversation, this is all about future and ideas and allowing just whatever comes to come out onto the table before anybody tries to figure out how or why or when or what is going to actually take place, right?
That's really important.
Because there's nothing more discouraging than throwing out this fun idea that you came up with and then having someone else just come up with why that's absolutely not going to work.
Oh, absolutely. And that doesn't create a very great team dynamic, team bond. You need to be able to trust each other
Yeah.
to not squash those things and to, hold them as important, even if you never do it. It doesn't really matter. It's more about, creating and building trust within the team.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know that I have done that myself in team meetings because I tend to be, again, that person who is the practical, well, how's this actually going to happen? That's
Mhm.
always in my head. So I think as the team leader, it's really important to indicate at the beginning of this discussion the purpose of the discussion and outline, okay, this is not where we're going to get into the logistics. This is just where we're going to get into the vision, the potential, the possibilities of what we could do in the next year. It does not mean that all of these ideas are realistic or that they will come to fruition. But it
Right.
means that this is what everybody thinks is a potential and what could happen.
Mhm.
Okay. So once you've gone through these questions, and again, I'm talking about personally, as a family, or as a team, once you've gone through some of these questions and you've cast some ideas out, you've cast some vision for the future, you're going to want to try to create a concise statement that summarizes your vision for the coming year. Now, some people might say create a vision statement for 5 years, for 10 years, you know, depending on your situation, you might want to change the time frame. But I'm saying, at least personally, I just want to look at the next year for myself and probably for my business as well. For larger organizations, they might want to have a longer term vision. Decide on the time frame and then come up with a statement that summarizes what your vision is for that time frame. And this, again, is going to be something that you're going to refer back to as an individual, as a family, as a team. Throughout the year, you can think about your vision statement and it can help you make those decisions that you have to make during, the middle of the year when you're deciding whether or not to go on a vacation. And if your vision statement was, we're going to pay off all our debt this year in 2019, that might be something that can help you realize, okay, maybe the vacation has to wait. So what we're doing for you is what we want you to do is take some time after you've done your reflection on 2018. Now what we want you to do is go ahead and dream and create your vision for 2019. And we have put together a download that will give you these questions that we've referred to throughout the episode, because I know when you're listening, you might be driving, you might be somewhere out, doing laundry or dishes, you might be out going for a walk, and you're probably not jotting down all these questions that we just went through. So we want to make it super easy. So we're giving you the list of all the questions that we've asked and that will help you with the dreaming and the vision. So you can go on to the show notes for this episode, which will be estherlittlefield.com/episode 26, and you can grab this download for the questions. So we want you to go through those questions and then write your statement, create your statement for the year. And then after that, in the upcoming episodes, we're going to dive deeper into, again, the setting of the goals which is going to get a little bit more specific about how you're going to get this vision and create it and make it happen during the year.
So as we wrap up, we want to do another rapid fire question time. This time we will ask questions in regards to Christmas and New Year's, since we're right in the middle of the holiday week. And so these are a little bit fun. Some of them are about Christmas and New Year's, and yeah. So I'm going to ask you the questions first.
Okay.
Okay, Esther?
Yep.
You ready? Okay. Do you clean up wrapping paper as you go or all at once at the end?
I should have thought about this. Actually, I like to kind of clean it up as I go, honestly. That's
Okay.
kind of my preference.
How long do you keep your tree up?
Usually until just before New Year's, maybe like a week after Christmas.
Do you go shopping the day after Christmas to get all the after Christmas sales?
Definitely not.
Do you stay up till midnight on New Year's Eve?
Most likely not.
Do you watch the ball drop?
Well, no. If I'm not up, I don't.
Do you go out or stay in to celebrate?
Oh, goodness. I love the idea of going out, but honestly, most of the time it's staying in and falling asleep before midnight.
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to ask you the same questions. So we're going
Okay.
to hear your answers, Holly.
Okay.
So do you clean up your wrapping paper as you go or at the end?
As we go.
How long do you keep your tree up?
I think the same as you, about till New Year's. Yeah.
Okay. Do you go shopping after Christmas for all the sales?
Yes.
Oh, that
I
does
love
not surprise
that.
me. Of course you do. Getting the deals. Do you stay up until midnight on New Year's Eve?
I try, but I don't always make it.
Yeah. Do you
And
watch the ball drop?
if I happen to get there, then I do.
Okay. And do you go out or stay in to celebrate?
Oh, I definitely stay in.
Yeah.
As we talked about before, this is not my favorite holiday, and so I just will probably go to bed. But I
Yeah.
thought it was funny what you mentioned when we were talking about this. This is like the mid-30s group answer.
Right. I'm thinking like we're mid-30s, we're moms, we're just like, yeah, it's 8 p.m. Yeah, we're ready for bed. Whereas some of you listening, maybe you're younger and you've got more energy, or maybe you're just a different personality. But
Yeah.
like I said, I love the idea of getting all dressed up and going out. But then I'm like, what would I do? Like, I don't even know what I would do or where I would go. So
Yeah.
I just usually, and my husband isn't really into like going out like that either. So it just doesn't, it's never made sense for us to do it. So
I will
yeah.
say though, the day after Christmas is a great time to buy, those holiday gift sets that have like shampoo and conditioner and stuff.
Oh,
I bought them last year and stocked up on all that stuff, and I still have them in my cupboard, and I have not bought shampoo all year long.
oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. It's such a good deal. You can get like these huge bottles for like $5 or something. So
That's hilarious.
that's what I do
Oh.
after.
Okay. Okay. And I will share one more thing too. Totally
Okay.
random, but you've stuck with us this long. So now you get the random stuff. We try to
That's
save
right.
it all till the end. So you don't get annoyed with us at the beginning of the episode
Yeah.
and stop listening. But if you stop listening now, it doesn't really matter. So
Yeah.
anyway, the thing that I do love doing on New Year's Eve, I thought of something. Is
Okay.
that I actually love just doing like a game night with friends.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if we can arrange for the kids to be at grandparents or, something like that, or the kids just to
Mhm.
have a sleepover, it's fun to just like kind of hang out and play games together as friends and do something like that. So that's usually if we do anything, it's going to be something like that.
Yeah. I
So,
love that. Just
yes.
like low key chilling.
Yeah, right.
I like
And
that.
probably lasting until like 9 or 10, and then everybody goes home because they're like, tired. So
Yeah, but that's only if you don't get into a heated game of Settlers.
oh, that's true. Settlers of Catan. Now you're getting my full nerd status that I love Settlers of Catan, and I'll try to make all my friends play it, but they won't always enjoy it. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway.
Well, we should probably wrap up. Okay.
Yeah, probably. Okay.
So thank you guys so much for being with us. Next week is New Year's Day. So the next episode will come out on New Year's Day, and there will be an episode. It will be a guest interview. So stay tuned for that. And then after that, you'll hear the next episode in our goal setting series with Holly and I. And we hope you had a great Christmas. We hope you have an awesome New Year's, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving us a rating and review in your podcast app? This helps more women just like you find the podcast, and it also helps them to know whether the podcast would be a good fit for them. Just go to the show in your podcast app, then scroll down until you see the option for ratings and reviews. From there, you can tap to rate and write a review. It means the world to us when you take a couple minutes to do this, and thank you so much to everyone who has left a review. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.